you filming?
This man has no place here. He left, so let him go.
You are not a community. You are judges who have already passed sentence.
Spring of 1912, Lancaster. The sky darkened all at once. Heavy, leaden clouds shoved across the green fields. Miriam Yoder, a short widow who worked as a weaver, was walking the dirt road home from the fair, carrying a skein of yarn in her basket. Suddenly, the wind tore loose. The willows along the verge squealed under its force. The first hailstones fell without warning. Hard pellets of ice drummed against the ground and leaves. Instinctively, Miriam hugged the basket to her chest, searching for any shelter from the squall. The road happened to bend around the base of a hill. In the slope, she saw a black opening the entrance to an abandoned root cellar. Without a second thought, Miriam ran for the refuge, shielding her head with a thin kerchief against the stinging blows of the hail. All at once, she spotted a motionless figure at the roadside. Her heart jumped. A man lay face down, his hat beside him. Ice already dusted his dark overcoat and shoulders. "Lord, have mercy," Miriam breathed and rushed to the stranger. He was heavy, but she hooked her arms under his and began to drag him toward the cellar, stumbling over the wet grass. The hail beat down harder and harder, lashing her back and arms, yet she strained on until they bumped down the steps into the half-dark of the shelter. Inside smelled of damp and earth. Thank heaven, there was an old wooden chest and a few sacks of musty hay, enough to lay the injured man down. Miriam was breathing hard, but she checked whether he was breathing. At his neck, her fingers found a faint pulse. Blood oozed at his temple, streaking his unshaven face. He had no beard, likely unmarried or not among the local Amish, she thought distantly. Long, dark ash hair clung together with blood and rain. "Can you hear me?" she called, touching his cheek. "Are you alive?" The man gave a faint groan. His eyelids fluttered but did not lift. He whispered something, and Miriam bent closer, trying to make out the words through the clatter of hail on the boards overhead. "Eli, the box," he rasped, barely moving his split lips. "Hush now, do not try to move," Miriam soothed, laying her palm on his shoulder. His body trembled, whether from cold or from shock. She pulled off her woolen shawl and tucked it over the stranger. For a pillow, she slid a rolled sack of hay beneath his head. Outside, the hail gradually quieted, giving way to the steady hush of rain. In the cellar's darkness, Miriam sat beside the unconscious man, watching him with worried eyes. "Who are you, and what happened to you? What box with papers are you muttering about?" She touched his brow, feverish. She needed to find water and bandage the wound. Do not scroll. The most interesting part is coming up. Subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment. When the downpour eased a little, Miriam rose carefully. The stranger gave a soft moan, as if he sensed her moving away. "I will be right back," she whispered. "I am only going for water. I will not abandon you." Darting out into the misting rain, she quickly found a nearby well and filled a pitcher with cool water. In the basket with the yarn, she kept a folded linen pouch. She tore it into strips for bandages. Back in the cellar, Miriam washed the man's temple and the deep cut on his forehead. The bleeding had slowed, but the gash looked bad, likely he had struck a stone or a wheel. She bound his head snugly with the cloth. He did not come to, but his breathing grew steadier. Settling beside him on the cold ground, Miriam realized she had started to shiver from cold and from exhaustion. Only now did she notice the ache in her own shoulder. She must have knocked it when she stumbled down the steps with her burden. But that was a trifle. The important thing was that she had saved a life. She looked again at the stranger. Young, about 30, sharp cheekbones, a straight nose. His clothes were made of stout fabric, but they looked well worn. His boots were caked with dust and mud. He had plainly come a long way. At last it grew quiet outside. Only a few tardy hailstones still fell. Miriam drew a deep breath, trying to calm the heart that was pounding from all she had just been through. She adjusted the shawl blanket over the wounded man and prayed, softly thanking the Lord that both of them had survived the storm. She had to decide what came next. Leaving the man in that damp cellar would not do. He would catch his death, or worse. Her house was half a mile from there. She might call the neighbors to help. But who would come out in such a rain? There was no time to waste. "Lord, give me strength," Miriam whispered. She carefully got the man out of the cellar. When she tried to set him on his feet, he could barely stand. His eyes were still shut. She slung his arm over her shoulders and slowly, step by step, led him on. The soaked road had turned to muck, and her feet sank in the clay. Jaw clenched, Miriam trudged forward. From time to time the stranger groaned with pain, but he moved almost as if in a half-sleep. There was her own yard at last, a low cottage with a shed and a spreading walnut tree at the gate. The last few steps were the hardest. Her strength was nearly gone. On the threshold he roused for a moment. He managed to lift his feet over the sill, helping her. The house was cool and dim. The stove had gone out. Miriam had not expected to be away so long. She got the man to her narrow bed in the corner and eased him down onto the mattress. He let out a heavy breath and went limp with weariness. Miriam lit the kerosene lamp on the table. Its dim yellow glow filled the small room. The stranger lay still, head bandaged, breathing deep. A large bruise had already risen at his left temple. She wrung out a clean rag and laid it against the swelling. Questions swarmed in her head. Who was he? How had he ended up on that road? What had happened to him? And what did those words about a box of papers mean? Miriam gently smoothed a lock of hair from his forehead. This man was now her responsibility, and she felt a strange mixture of fear and resolve. Teeth chattering from the cold and the shock, she fed wood into the stove and set a kettle to boil. The night passed in worry. Miriam scarcely closed her eyes. Whenever she dozed off on the chair by the bed, a groan or feverish mumbling woke her. He tossed in his sleep, calling someone softly in words she could not make out. Each time she sprang up, laid a cool rag on his brow, and whispered, "It is all right. You are safe." Toward dawn, the man finally quieted and sank into a deep, dreamless sleep. Exhausted, Miriam let out a quiet breath of relief. Now she could study him better by lamplight. His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes. His cheeks were rough with several days' growth. Whoever he was, he clearly worked with his hands. His palms were calloused, his fingers nicked with small scars. Broad shoulders, strong arms. A carpenter or a farmer, she guessed. Miriam herself was a young widow, only 27. Her husband had died 2 years earlier during the harvest. Since then, she had lived alone, earning her keep by weaving and by tending a small household. She had long since grown unaccustomed to a man's presence in her home. The east began to gray. Miriam stepped onto the porch to breathe the fresh air. The yard gleamed with wet, and in low spots hail still lay in drifts like late snow. A hen that had hidden under the wagon now scampered out to peck at the damp grain. Broken walnut branches and a battered vegetable patch testified to the storm's force. She went back inside with a bucket of fresh water. The man on the bed stirred and groaned. She set down the bucket and came closer. His eyes opened slowly. For a time he stared at the ceiling, as if trying to grasp where he was. Then he looked over at her. "How," he began hoarsely, then fell silent because his throat was dry. "Do not talk yet. You were hurt in the storm," Miriam explained gently. "I found you on the road and brought you here. This is the Yoder farm, not far from Lancaster. You are safe." He peered at her through narrowed lids. His eyes were clear, gray with a greenish cast. Suddenly, he tried to sit up, but a stab of pain in his head made him groan and lie back again. "Lie still," she said, placing her hand on his shoulder to stop any sudden movement. He tensed at the stranger's touch, but he quickly understood she meant to help and relaxed. "Who are you?" he whispered barely above a breath. "I am Miriam, and what is your name?" The man shut his eyes. Sweat beaded on his brow beneath the bandage. Remembering his name was plainly hard. I do not remember," he murmured, shame and confusion in his voice. Miriam leaned closer. "You do not remember your own name?" He gave the slightest shake of his head and winced from the pain. "My head is foggy. I am sorry." "Do not apologize. You have a hard blow to the head. Your memory may not return right away," she reassured him, though worry pricked at her. so he did not even know his own name. She helped him sit up a little and tucked an extra pillow behind him. She brought a mug of water. He took it with trembling hands. To keep him from spilling, she steadied the rim. After a few greedy swallows, he caught his breath. "I found you yesterday in the hail," Miriam said softly, to orient him. "You were unconscious, rambling. You spoke the name, Eli. Is that your name?" The man concentrated with effort. "Eli, yes, I suppose my name is Eli," he said uncertainly. "All right, Eli," she repeated gently. This man could be anyone, but the name sounded familiar. Once upon a time, a boy named Eli had lived in the area, maybe from the King family. Miriam's mind drifted a moment, but it did not matter now. "Eli, do you remember what happened to you? Why you ended up on the road in the middle of the storm?" she asked carefully. He ran his fingers over the bandage, as if to feel the wound. The movement made him grimace again. "I was riding, then thunder. Did the horse throw me?" he sighed. "I remember nothing else." Miriam nodded. Nothing strange about that after such a blow. Still, the riddle remained. "When I was carrying you, you said, 'The box, papers, bank.' Does that mean anything to you?" He closed his eyes and furrowed his brow. Nearly a minute passed. Miriam thought he had fallen asleep when, all at once, he said quietly, "I remember only that it is important. A box with papers, the road to the bank, but I do not understand what it is about." He sighed heavily and looked at her with a guilty, helpless glance. "I do not remember anything from before the fall. I am sorry." "It is all right, do not worry. Your memory will come back. For now, just rest, you are very weak," she said softly. Miriam turned back to the stove, where the kettle had begun to sing, and spooned herbs into a cup mint, lemon balm, and a little valerian to settle the patient. Eli watched her in silence. His gaze wandered around the room he was likely taking in the place. The cottage was plain, wooden walls, a floor of rough planks. In the corner stood a loom with neatly stacked rolls of cloth beside it. On the shelves, clay dishes. On the table, a lamp, a Bible, and a basket of thread. Poor, but clean and homey. Miriam handed him the warm infusion and helped him take a few sips. The steam brought a faint flush to his pale face. "Thank you," he said softly, passing the cup back. "You are welcome. It is no trouble," she answered. She wanted to ask more, but he looked so spent that she decided not to press him. Let him gather strength. "Forgive me, Miss Miriam," he said hesitantly, unsure how to address her. "Forgive me for being a burden. You saved me. I do not know how to repay you." "There is no need to thank me," she said gently. "The Lord led me down that road so I could help you." Eli lowered his eyes. "Perhaps you are very kind." Miriam felt warmth rise in her cheeks. She dropped her gaze and began to gather the empty cup and the rags to hide her embarrassment. "Rest now. Later I will make you a potato broth. You need something hearty," she said. Eli nodded and closed his eyes, slipping back into sleep. Miriam let out a quiet sigh and stepped outside so as not to disturb the invalid. The sun had climbed higher, light flooding the yard. She needed to tend the little bit of farm work. There was not much of it. The rooster crowed loudly to announce the new day. While she fed the chickens and the one goat, her thoughts returned to the stranger. Who was this Eli? He did not seem like an ordinary traveler. Where had he gotten a box of papers, and what did a bank have to do with it? A courier? But his hands were far too work-worn for a man of pen and ink, more likely a craftsman. And how would a craftsman be tied up with papers and a bank? She also worried that he was in her house. By the rules of the community, it was not proper for a woman living alone to keep a man in her home without other family present. Even though she was a widow and had taken him in out of mercy, people might gossip. As soon as Illy could walk, she would move him to the empty little storeroom by the house. He would be more comfortable there and not so much in sight. Having fed the animals, she went for more water. The bucket creaked as it rose from the well. Footsteps suddenly sounded behind her. Turning, Miriam saw her neighbor and mentor Rachel hurrying into the yard. Rachel was a woman of respected years, a little older than Miriam's mother. She often visited the young widow with help and kind counsel. Her gray hair was drawn into a tight knot under a white prayer cap. Her face shone with sincere concern. "Miriam, dear, how are you?" she said anxiously at the door. "I saw you running in the hail yesterday. I worried whether you made it home all right." "Thanks be to God, I am fine," Miriam answered, ushering her mentor inside. But something happened. With a gesture, she asked for quiet and pointed to the bed where the wounded man slept. Then she quietly told Rachel about the previous evening, how she had found the man, sheltered him in the cellar during the hail, and brought him to her house. "Merciful Lord," Rachel whispered, crossing herself. "Who is he?" "He says his name is Eli. He remembers nothing else, no family name, not where he comes from." Rachel frowned. "Poor soul. Amnesia can follow a hard blow. We must pray for his memory to return." Miriam's shoulders sagged. "I do not know what to do, teacher. Keeping a man in the house when I am alone is not proper. People will wag their tongues. But where can I send him? He knows nothing about himself." Rachel laid her hand over Miriam's. "You did the right thing. You could not leave him. And as for tongues, God sees your mercy, and people, well, people will always talk. If need be, I will warn the sharpest tongues. Do not be afraid, you are not alone." Miriam managed a small smile. Her mentor's support steadied her. "I was thinking that once he is a little stronger, I will move him to the storeroom next to the house. It is dry, and there is a cot. I will feel easier, and he will be more comfortable." "Good. I will ask my Jacob to stop by and help when he has a moment," Rachel said with a nod. Her husband was always ready to lend a hand to the widows of the community. "Do we need a doctor?" Rachel asked softly, studying the sleeper's pale face. Miriam lifted a shoulder. "The cut is deep, but I have washed it and wrapped it. He wakes, he speaks a little. I will give him herbs to keep down the inflammation. If he worsens, then we will call a doctor." Rachel agreed. She looked again at the injured man. "Eli, you say, and the family name?" "He cannot recall. But look," Miriam said, lifting a small carving tool from his dried clothing and showing the handle. Burned into the wooden haft were the letters E, King. "E, King," Rachel read. "In English, that is king. There have been kings in our district. Do you remember Jonah King? His son Eli went out into the world a few years back, just before baptism." Miriam remembered. Yes, there had been talk of a young man from a neighboring village who left the community before taking his vows. At the time, it was a sensation. Folks said he had gone to the city, wanting to be a cabinet maker among the English. She did not know the details, since it had not been in their village, but she had heard the name. "So this is that same Eli King," she whispered. "It seems so. Now that I know who he is, what a wonder the Lord has brought him back. Jonah and Martha King prayed so hard for his return. Perhaps he truly has come back, even if in such a state." Anxiousness stirred in Miriam. She had taken in a man who had once left the community. Such men were not shunned outright, yet trust in them was thin. Some considered them a temptation to the young. Gossip would be unavoidable. Rachel was likely thinking the same. She sighed. "While he is recovering here, be cautious. Not everyone will be pleased to learn who he is, especially Deacon Abram." "Abram? Why?" Miriam asked, surprised. Deacon Abram was one of the church leaders in the community, a respected but stern man. Rachel lowered her voice. "Abram is first cousin to that surveyor Henry Miller, who lives in town. And Henry, I recall, once urged Abram to beware of those who return from the world. He said they bring trouble and a bad example." Miriam's brow knit. She knew Abram's strict temper. It did not surprise her to hear he might be prejudiced against Eli. "Should I tell him now?" she asked, hesitant. "Do not rush. Let Eli get his strength back first. If he remembers nothing, spreading the news will only harm him. God grant he recalls his family, then we can reach out to his parents. After that, we will speak to the minister and the deacon." Miriam nodded, relieved that her mentor did not insist on running straight to the church leadership. Rightly so, Eli needed to recover and to remember who he was and what had happened. Otherwise, there would be much noise and gossip and little good. Eli suddenly stirred and groaned, waking. He had likely heard their voices. Miriam quickly filled a cup with water and went to the bed. Eli opened his eyes. Seeing an unfamiliar woman in the room, he tensed, but Miriam smiled. "Do not worry, this is my neighbor and friend Rachel. She has come to help." Rachel nodded kindly. "Good day, Eli. I heard you were hurt, so if you need anything, I am close by." Her tone was simple and sincere, without prying. Eli tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Miriam lifted the mug to his lips. He took a few swallows, watching Rachel warily over the rim. "Thank you," he said quietly, looking away. He seemed shy of strangers, whether from weakness or from his lost memory. "Well then, I see you are in good hands," Rachel said briskly. "Miriam is a fine nurse." Miriam flushed, and Eli gave the faintest smile. Rachel rose. "I only stopped to make sure all is well. I will bring some chicken broth later. It will strengthen you. And you rest. Peace to you." Eli gave a small nod. "Thank you." As Rachel stepped out, she whispered to Miriam, "I am nearby. Remember, caution." Miriam gave a firm nod. She was grateful for such a friend, but anxious too. The days ahead might be difficult. Yet when she looked at the pale man who had closed his eyes again, she knew this. To turn him out would betray not only him, but her own principles of mercy. Gently, she took the cup from his hands and pulled the blanket higher over his shoulders. Then she sat down beside him, listening to his even breathing. Trials lay ahead, but that morning in the little cottage there was peace, and both of them, the widow and the stranger, could rest a while from the storm, each with private hopes and fears. 2 days passed. Eli had plainly improved. He could sit up and even walk carefully, though quick movements still made his head swim. As Miriam had planned, they moved him to the small shed room beside the house. It was dry and quiet there. He accepted the change calmly and with gratitude. That morning, Eli stepped into the yard to breathe fresh air. In the garden, Miriam was picking the young spinach that had survived the hail. Eli leaned on the fence, gazing out at the distant fields. His eyes roamed over familiar sights, the outlines of barns, horses in the meadows, a thread of smoke above the thatch. In his heart, he felt the place was his own, even if his mind could not supply the details. "How are you, Eli?" Miriam called, coming closer. "Better, thank you. My head still aches, but my thoughts are clearer," he answered evenly. Over these days, he had warmed to her a little, though he still held himself in. Miriam brightened. "That is good. Another day or two of quiet, and who knows, your memory may return." Eli sighed and met her eyes. "I hope so. Sometimes it seems as though I have lived here all my life. I cannot remember, but I feel at home." "Perhaps you truly are local," she began, but just then the rumble of wheels sounded at the gate. A buggy drew up in the yard. Deacon Abram alone. He surveyed the place and measured Miriam and her guest with a cool glance. "Peace to you, Sister Miriam," Abram greeted, without climbing down. "And peace to you, Deacon," she replied, feeling her chest give a quick thump. "I hear you picked someone up during the storm." Abram narrowed his eyes, peering at Eli. "Yes, this man was hurt, and she began, but the deacon cut her off, addressing the newcomer instead. "What is your name?" "Eli," he said quietly. "Eli King, is it?" Abram squinted. "I remember you, the son of Jonah King. You are the one who left us a few years back. And here you are again." There was more suspicion than welcome in his voice. Eli lowered his head. "Is this conversation helpful so far?" "He has lost his memory," Miriam said quickly. "He feels ill, so he is lying low here. As soon as he gets better, we will decide what comes next." The deacon scowled. "See that there is no temptation and no disorder. You are a widow. He is another woman's husband. This is unbecoming. And in general, people remember his stunt. The next time, they may not take him back." Miriam felt stung by his words, but kept silent and lowered her eyes. "Thank you, we understand," Eli said quietly. "The moment I am able, I will move on so as not to cause trouble." Abram nodded. "Good. The congregation does not need a scandal right now." He snapped the reins. "Go with God. Be cautious." And without saying goodbye, he drove off down the road. Miriam felt the tension slip from her shoulders. "Pay it no mind," she said gloomily. "Abram is always strict." Eli gave a sad smile. "He is not wrong. I do not wish to bring you any grief. As soon as I recover, I will leave at once, so neither you nor the community will have extra problems." "You are no burden to anyone," Miriam objected. "You are in no way to blame for the misfortune that happened to you and the congregation. You will see, not everyone is as severe as the deacon." Eli only shrugged. It was plain that Abram's words had struck him. To break the silence, Miriam changed the subject quickly. "Shall we get you some breakfast? I just gathered some eggs." After breakfast, Eli rested a little, and by midday he insisted on helping with the chores. "I do not want to sit idle. Let me fix a few things. I saw a board loose in the fence." Miriam agreed. Her late husband's tools were still in the shed, and Eli set to work. He nailed a new board onto the fence, tightened the pantry's squeaky door, and even repaired a wobbly shelf in the kitchen. Miriam watched how deftly he handled the hammer and chisel and realized she was looking at a skilled craftsman. "You are good at this," she remarked when he finished the small repairs. Eli wiped his brow with his sleeve. "I suppose this is what I used to do. My hands remember, though my head forgot." Miriam helped by holding the boards and nails. When everything was done, they put the tools back on the shelf together. They were standing very close. Miriam suddenly felt her heart pounding. "Thank you for giving me shelter and work," Eli said gently. She met his gaze and faltered for a moment. His eyes were warm and grateful. "There is no need to thank me. I am glad you are getting better," she said softly. An awkward hush fell between them. Miriam quickly stepped back, burning with a sudden flutter of nerves. "You need to rest," she said. "I will make lunch, and you lie down for a while." Eli came to his senses too, as if catching himself, and dutifully went to the storeroom. Before long, a teenager from the neighboring homestead ran over with a note from the neighbor. He wrote, "A horse saddle and saddlebags were found in the ditch by the road after the storm. If your livestock are all present, these might belong to your guest. I set them on your porch." Miriam stepped outside and saw a worn saddle and 2 leather saddlebags on the porch. Could they be his? She called Eli at once. He came out to the porch, saw the find, and his eyes widened. He ran his hand over the saddle carefully. "This is mine. My horse must have bolted, and my things were lost." They carried the saddlebags into the kitchen. Inside one lay a heavy wooden box with a lock, and the key was sticking in the keyhole. Miriam's heart pounded while Eli nervously turned the key. The lock clicked, and he lifted the lid. Inside lay a bundle of papers tied with cord. Eli took the top sheet and scanned it quickly. "This is a power of attorney to purchase land for a school. Here is my signature," he whispered. His fingers trembled. He dug through the papers and pulled out another document. "And this, oh God, this is a counterfeit. My name is here too, but I did not sign this." Miriam looked. It was a second authorization or agreement. The signature resembled Eli's, yet something about the script was off. Eli clutched his head, and his face darkened with something like guilt. "I am beginning to remember. They asked me to help buy a parcel for a school because I had lived in the world and could handle money. I agreed, bought the land, signed the authorization, and then Henry Miller, the surveyor, demanded that I sign another paper. I refused because I suspected foul play. He grew angry. I took the documents and meant to reach the bank, to secure them and inform the elder. But on the way I was attacked. After that I remember only thunder and pain." "So that was the box and the bank you mentioned in your fever," Miriam exclaimed. She sifted through the papers in a rush. One was notarized and contained Henry Miller's name and that of a middleman, the man to whom the land had been illegally transferred. Everything lined up. "Henry Miller is kin to the deacon," she murmured, grasping the scope of the trouble. "He has cheated us." Illy's hands balled into fists. It was hard for him to accept that a man close to the congregation would do such a thing. "It means he reassigned the school land to a straw man in order to keep it or sell it. This is fraud." Miriam shook her head. "A crime against the community." They looked at each other, the same spark of resolve in both their eyes. "We must tell Rachel at once," Miriam decided. "She will advise how best to inform Elder Samuel. We shall not tell Abram, yet you understand why." "Yes, let us not," Eli agreed. "First Rachel and the elder. Between the two of them, they will find a way. The main thing is not to lose time." Miriam locked the compromising documents back in the box and hid it in a safe place. "Stay in the house and rest while I run to Rachel." "Be careful," Eli asked, following her with his eyes. "If this is Miller's doing, he could be dangerous." "Do not be afraid, I will be right back," she called over her shoulder and ran out of the yard. Miriam's heart was pounding up in her throat. Their quiet life had suddenly turned into a whirl of events. Yet she felt almost no fear. She was filled, strangely, with clarity and determination. She knew she was doing the right thing. They had to save the school land and clear Eli's good name. Miriam quickly told Rachel about her suspicions regarding Miller. The teacher sent a boy for Elder Samuel at once. An hour later, the four of them gathered at Rachel's house. The hostess herself, Miriam, Eli, and the elder. The wooden box with the papers lay open on the table. Samuel skimmed the documents quickly, shaking his head. "So the worst has come true. The parcel for our new school was fraudulently transferred to an outsider, and Eli's signature on the second authorization was forged," the elder concluded bitterly. "What are we to do?" Miriam asked impatiently. "How do we get the land back for the children?" Samuel stroked his beard. "First, we confirm everything officially. There is a bank clerk, Mr. Roberts, an honorable man who processed the first authorization. We will go to him, let him compare the signatures. Not a word to Abram yet. First, he is Henry's relative. Second, we will not accuse without proof." All agreed. They decided to set out for town in the morning. Rachel stayed to look after Eli, and Miriam and the elder, with Jacob, went to meet the clerk. Mr. Roberts listened carefully and compared both documents. "This is plainly a forgery," he confirmed, pointing out the inconsistencies in the pen strokes of the signature. "I personally notarized the first authorization at the bank, and I am seeing the second one for the first time." He also provided a statement. The owner of the disputed parcel was suddenly listed as one Frederick, clearly a front. No doubt remained. That same evening, Elder Samuel, in the presence of Deacon Abram and two senior brethren, called Henry Miller in for a talk. Miriam waited for news in Rachel's yard, nervously wringing her apron. After a hard conversation, the door opened. Henry Miller stood on the threshold, face flushed, eyes angry. Without a word, he rushed out, slamming the door. Elder Samuel and Abram came out after him. Abram looked stunned. "He would not repent," Samuel said heavily to Miriam and Rachel. "He denies everything and says he only meant the best for the congregation." "No matter. Now let the congregation decide." Abram shrank and barely managed to say, "I never thought my cousin would pull a thing like this. Forgive me that I failed to guard against it." He was speaking more to Eli and Miriam. "We will decide this at a congregational meeting," Samuel said firmly. "We will inform the people so they can prepare. This cannot be overlooked. We must reclaim what is ours, even if we have to call on the civil court." That night, Miriam lay awake a long time. Yes, now the truth was on their side, but ahead lay a test of the community's unity. She worried that it might sow enmity. Before parting, Beely said to her softly, "Do not be afraid. Together we will get through everything." His words warmed her spirit, and at last her eyes closed. The next Sunday, after the service, the congregation assembled for an extraordinary meeting. In the schoolyard, across from the empty parcel, Several dozen men stood in a circle. Women and young people gathered off to the side. Although they did not vote, they were no less anxious. Elder Samuel announced the bad news. "Brothers and sisters, a wrong has been done. The land we purchased for our new school has been taken from us by deceit. The culprit is Henry Miller. We have gathered proof and spoken with him. He denies it all. So the question now is before you. What shall we do to reclaim what is ours?" The crowd hummed. Many already knew about the scandal. News travels fast in a small community. People murmured in outrage. Women clasped their heads. Henry's name was spoken in a whisper, as if it burned the tongue. The head of the community stepped forward. "This is a great shame. But how did we allow it? Who entrusted this matter to an outsider?" Deacon Abram, abashed, raised his hand. "The fault is mine. I asked my cousin Henry to help with the purchase. I thought he could be trusted. Forgive me." "What is done," the headman said with a shake of his head. "We must decide how to get the land back." Elder Samuel spoke firmly. "We believe there is no way around the civil courts. Henry will not admit guilt. The parcel is recorded under a front. We must hire an attorney and proceed by lawful means." His words met not only approval, but some caution. One of the conservative brethren, named Martin, called out, "Is it fitting for the Amish to go to court? Would it not be simpler to buy another plot and avoid disgracing ourselves before the English, meaning the outsiders?" Several men nodded grimly. The prospect of going into the civil courts frightened many. Miriam, who stood among the women at the back, could not contain herself. Her heart burned with indignation. She stepped forward, fists clenched from nerves. "Brothers, we cannot abandon justice out of fear. This land was bought with the money of every family everyone saved up, even the poor, so our children could have a school. And now it has been stolen from us. Shall we be silent? God sees the truth. The law is on our side here. If we accept theft today, tomorrow they will come to steal again." The women behind her voiced their approval. Several mothers cried out, "That is right. We must stand up for the children." The men glanced at one another. The brave words of the young widow moved many. Samuel raised his hand in support. "Our sister speaks rightly. We answer to God for our children. We must not leave them without a school because of someone's greed." Brother Martin scowled but kept quiet, chastened by the swell of support. Abram stepped forward again, tears in his eyes. "I ask the congregation to forgive my blindness and to support the elder. We must get the land back and clear our name, otherwise the sin will fall on all of us." The elder asked briefly, "Who is in favor of demanding the return of the land, even if we must go to court?" Almost all the men in the circle raised their hands. The decision was unanimous. "Very well," Samuel said. "I will make arrangements with an attorney and conduct the case on your behalf." People exchanged relieved looks. Women wiped away tears, thanking God. Miriam felt a stone drop from her heart. Several sisters squeezed her hand. "Well done for saying that." She only exhaled, "I had to. There was no other way." Illy had not spoken at the meeting as one not a member of the church. He stood apart. But now he walked up to Miriam. Pride and tenderness shone in his eyes. "You are brave," he whispered as people began to disperse. Miriam lowered her gaze, feeling her cheeks burn. "I only said what I thought," she replied. They walked home side by side. Here and there they heard angry words about Henry, but most people talked about the unity of the congregation and thanked God that the truth had come to light. Miriam and Eli were quiet. Both felt at peace. The worst was behind them. The legal troubles lasted several weeks. The attorney hired by the congregation filed a complaint. Henry Miller, seeking to avoid a public trial, agreed to a settlement. The parcel for the school was returned to the community, and compensation was paid for the remainder of the land. Disgraced, Henry left town quickly and never appeared there again. The news of the victory was met with joy. After Sunday service, a modest common meal was held in thanks to God. Elder Samuel publicly praised all who had stood for the truth. He especially thanked Eli and Miriam. The Lord brought Brother Eli to our parts at the right time to expose wrongdoing, and Sister Miriam showed courage and did not allow the sin to be hidden. People nodded in approval. Miriam blushed at the attention, and Eli lowered his eyes, embarrassed. Yet after the meal, many neighbors approached them. They shook Eli's hand, thanked him, and welcomed him as one of their own. Deacon Abram also came, gripped Eli's shoulders, and said, "Forgive me for suspecting you. You proved your honesty. I am glad you are with us again. I hope you will stay for a long time." "Thank you," Eli said, deeply moved. "I hope so too." That evening, Miriam and Eli walked home together, no longer hiding now. No one saw anything wrong in it. The sun set beyond the horizon, tinting the clouds a gentle rose. They walked in silence, but an understanding passed between them. At the gate, Miriam dared to ask what she had been holding in her heart. "Eli, what will you do next? Do you have any plans?" He stopped and looked into her eyes. "If I am accepted, I would like to stay here, to return to the congregation. I have prayed for the Lord to show me the way, and he has brought me home and given me a chance to set things right." Miriam could barely restrain a smile of joy. "You want to join the church? To be baptized?" "Yes," he confirmed firmly. "I was a fool to leave back then. I do not want to wander anymore. If the brothers and sisters will receive me, I want to live anew. This is my home." Miriam felt warmth in her chest. "They have already received you. You see it, everyone treats you kindly." Eli nodded. After a pause, he added more quietly, "There is something else, very important to me, but I will say it after the baptism." Miriam understood the hint and felt her cheeks flush. "Then I will wait," she whispered, lowering her eyes. They walked into the yard together, where peace and new hopes awaited them. Quiet summer months lay ahead. Work, Eli's preparation for baptism, and perhaps something more, which they still spoke of only in half hints. Late that night, Eli was awake when he heard a soft knock on the storeroom door. His heart quickened. Who could it be? He rose quickly and opened it. By the dim light of the moon, he saw Miriam. She stood barefoot on the grass, a light shawl thrown over her nightdress. "Miriam, has something happened?" he whispered, worried. She gave a faint smile and shook her head. "No, I just cannot sleep. I saw your lamp, so you are awake too." "Come in," he said, stepping aside to let her in. The storeroom was cramped but clean. The lamp cast flickering shadows on the walls. Miriam sat on the edge of the narrow cot, clutching the shawl to her chest. Her face was a little pale. "Are you sure you are all right?" he asked softly, sitting down on the small stool beside her. She sighed. "My thoughts will not let me rest. About all that has happened, about what will be. I am glad, and I am anxious." "What are you afraid of?" he asked gently. Miriam lowered her eyes. "I fear that all this happiness is like a dream, that I will wake up, and the emptiness will be back around me. Everything is so good now, it scares me that something might happen again." Eli laid his warm hand over her cold fingers. "I am afraid too," he admitted. "I fear not living up to the trust. But one thing I know for certain, I am not going anywhere if you want me to stay." Miriam lifted her eyes to him. Tears shone there, but happy ones. "I do," she whispered. Eli's heart hammered wildly. In the tight little storeroom, in the hush of the night, they admitted openly for the first time that they needed one another. Eli moved carefully from the stool to sit beside her on the cot. Their hands were still clasped. "I thank God that you found me on the road that day," he said quietly. "You saved my life in both the literal and the figurative sense, and you gave me hope for the future." She smiled through her tears. "I thank God for you too. You brought back my faith that my heart is still alive." Her voice broke, and she bowed her head, shy at her own confession. Eli gently raised his hand and caught a tear rolling down her cheek with his fingertips. At his touch, Miriam trembled involuntarily, but did not draw back. "Miriam," he whispered. No other words came. He carefully brushed a strand of hair from her face. She lifted her face, their eyes met. Eli felt his hand move of its own accord to her shoulder, then gently around her waist. Miriam did not resist. She could hear a wild heartbeat, whether her own or his, she could not tell. They were so close they could feel each other's breath. Eli swallowed air. He wanted to hold her tightly, to join their lips, but his conscience stopped him in time. He only rested his forehead against hers. Her body trembled in his arms. Miriam sensed the boundary was dangerously near. She shyly tilted her head and rested her forehead against his chest to quiet the frantic beating of her heart. Eli held her more firmly, shielding her from the whole world. "How frightened I was of losing you," she confessed barely above a whisper. "When you lay unconscious, I prayed for you every day." Eli stroked her back, rocking her slightly. "You will never lose me again, I promise. I will always be near as long as God allows." Miriam lifted her head, and their faces were very close. His hot breath grazed her lips. She closed her eyes, sensing that he too was poised on the edge. Eli held his breath. His hand caressed a strand of her hair. He touched his lips, ever so lightly, to her forehead, a gentle, reverent kiss. They both trembled with restrained feeling. At last Miriam came to herself and drew back a little. "We must be patient, just a little longer," she whispered, looking into his eyes. Eli nodded, slowly releasing her from his embrace. "I will wait as long as it takes," he said hoarsely. She rose, straightening the shawl on her shoulders. He walked her to the door. On the threshold, Miriam turned and said softly, "Good night, my dear." Warmth spread through Eli's chest at that word. "Good night, my love," he answered just as softly. She vanished into the darkness, and he stood for a long time in the open doorway, staring into the night. Sleep never came to him that night, but in the morning, when a new day dawned, peace and certainty filled his soul. He knew for whom he was taking each next step. The fall of 1912 was warm. In September, Eli was baptized and joined the church. When he knelt in the pond and the elder poured cold water over his head, Miriam could not hold back tears of joy. Now he was a full brother of the congregation. After the service, the congregation greeted the newly baptized. Friends clapped Eli on the shoulder. The older sisters joked about the prodigal son who has come home. Eli smiled awkwardly, accepting both the jokes and the congratulations. Miriam stood to the side, carefully holding his wet hat, radiant with happiness. That same day, near the close of the gathering, the elder announced another piece of news. He called for quiet and said, "I have the pleasant duty to report that Brother Eli King and Sister Miriam Yoder have asked for a blessing to marry. If no one objects, the wedding will take place this November." A joyful murmur rose beneath the apple trees. "Thanks be to God," someone among the young folks cried. The women began to embrace Miriam, and the men shook Eli's hand. No one even thought to object. It was obvious to everyone that these two were given to each other by heaven. Miriam and Eli stood side by side, holding hands, struggling not to laugh and cry at the same time. At last their love was open to all. All that remained were the final preparations for the wedding. As always, the congregation pitched in. The women sewed a simple blue dress and a white bonnet for the bride, and a traditional black suit for the groom. The men put Miriam's homestead in order. They repaired the roof, reinforced the fence, and tidied the yard, everything so the couple could begin their life together in comfort. The young people practiced wedding songs. Everyone waited for the day when two hearts would be joined forever. At last, the November wedding day arrived. The whole congregation gathered at Miriam's house. The furniture was carried outside, and the room was turned into a chapel. The bride, in her new blue dress and white bonnet, looked calm and happy. The groom, in his traditional black suit, stood beside her, trying to hide his nerves. The ceremony was simple and moving. After prayers and sermons, the couple made their vows before God. When Eli said yes softly and placed the ring on Miriam's finger, tears of joy rose in many eyes. After the wedding, the guests sat at long tables set in the yard. They were served homemade chicken soup, roast, and pies. The newlyweds moved among the tables, receiving congratulations and gifts, mostly useful things for their shared household. At the end of the meal, Deacon Abram asked to speak. He stood and announced, "From the entire congregation, we have a special gift for you, Eli and Miriam." At his signal, several men carried a large carved chest into the yard. "We made this chest together," Abram said, "and our sisters sewed the quilt that lies inside. Please accept this gift from us, all a good keepsake and a good beginning for your home." Miriam could not hold back tears of emotion. Eli embraced the old deacon and shook the craftsman's hands. That gift, the embodiment of collective love, was the best of blessings. As dusk fell, the guests began to depart. By custom, the newlyweds did not go on a trip. They stayed to clean up after the celebration with their kin. Yet no one felt tired. Their hearts were full of bright joy. Late in the evening, quiet settled over the village. A lamp glowed in the window of their house. Inside, Miriam sat at the spinning wheel. Drawing out the thread in steady rhythm, she had turned to her favorite work to soothe the sweet excitement of the day. Eli's sleeves rolled up, sat at the table carving a wooden frame for a future family portrait. He set the chisel aside and walked to his wife. For a few minutes he stood in silence, watching how carefully she spun, hardly able to believe his happiness. It seemed that only yesterday he had been an outcast without a memory and without a future, and today he stood in his own home beside the woman he loved. "Is it not too much to sit at the wheel right after a day like this?" he teased gently. Miriam smiled and stopped the wheel. "My hands reach for work on their own, and I think it helps me sort my thoughts." "What are you thinking about?" he asked, laying his hands on her shoulders. She leaned back against his chest and sighed warmly. "About our path. In the spring I was alone and did not know what would come. And now." Eli bent to meet her gaze. "Now we are together," he said softly. "God has given us a second chance, and we will not waste it." Miriam raised a hand and stroked his cheek tenderly. "I love you," she whispered, simple words she could now say openly. "I love you too," Eli smiled and drew her close. They stood by the window, holding each other and looking into the quiet night. The light of their lamp shone gently outward. In that light was their whole life, a calm, strong love that had weathered a storm and only burned brighter. The congregation had given them a second chance, and it had kindled a good fire for the joy of all around. Subscribe to our channel so you do not miss out, because this is nothing compared to what comes next. If you are under 18, do not even think about pressing next.